baths, spiritual cleansings.
Mm-hmm.
Your eyes are just wild.
All right, let's go ahead and let the algorithm kick in a little bit before we start. And take a deep breath in and settle in for our lovely conversation this morning. All right, so today we're going to talk about spiritual bypass. And this came up a couple weeks ago for a subject, and I think we've talked about this before. And it just popped into my mind again while driving yesterday to North Carolina. So I was just like, oh, maybe this is the subject we're talking about because it popped in. And all right, there's obviously some things that need to be said. So let's introduce ourselves real quick. I am Majestic Michelle. I am actually traveling right now. Right now, I'm in North Carolina and just enjoying seeing the different parts of the South and the US and get to have all different kinds of experiences with my business. I love having a traveling business. Shania, introduce yourself.
My name is Shania. I live in Minot, North Dakota, and I don't know what else. I'm a healer, medium, and I do tarot cards, that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Althea.
Well, my name is Althea Mitchell. I'm in Riverton, Wyoming. I am a certified emotion code practitioner. This is kind of fun, but really, like, it's just kind of today. I apologize. I'm a little scattered.
No apology needed. We all have these moments. I think we're all kind of feeling that way right now. And maybe that's our subject today, how to handle what's going on when the other things pop in. Who knows? Because I've been had some things that's going on, but today's subject is actually on spiritual bypass. And one of the things that really said an aha moment to me about spiritual bypass was a couple years ago. I was doing a class on to becoming a practitioner, which is a licensed therapist through the church, and it taught actually teaches you how to bypass everything. Like you don't deal with the dark side, you don't deal with the loving and sending love to your shadow side of yourself and things that have happened to be able to release and overcome them. It just says, if you think about the positive more and more and more, it's going to show up. And I was like, but that's a lot of work. How can we make this easier and not have to go through all this work day in and day out? Because if we're keeping it all mental, it takes a really long time for it to become emotional. And so it's like, okay, how can we just bring this down to the emotions, deal with the shadow side of us, and be able to move on a lot quicker? And so with today's subject being spiritual bypass, Althea, when was your first aha moment about realizing about spiritual bypass?
Well, it's interesting to me because it's like I don't. I think that there's several points that we all get to, and I don't think it happens all at once. I think it happens in increments because I think that as you're going through stuff, like you get to a point where you're like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. So something needs to change. Then you go through this adjustment period of where like you're like, what needs to change? Because sometimes I think we find ourselves in overwhelm and we don't know where to start. And because there's so much that you're like, okay, I need to fix everything. And so I don't, I think that when we get to this, like there is this, how do you do this work without like getting too deep? Because, you know, I, I think that the more that you try to bypass it is kind of an easy out, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
It's not that we want to reject every part of us, but sometimes it's really difficult to look at ourselves and say, maybe I am doing that. And, but those aha moments when you're like, oh, yes, that would be me. Um, It's kind of like, okay, I guess I need to work on that. It may not be enjoyable, but it's like, okay, I can either choose to do it right now, or I'm going to experience it a little more intense later on. So that's what I kind of think.
And Shanya, what about you?
Um, so it's a very hard question to answer. Like she said, it's kind of in increments. But I'm one of those who loves to stay in denial when it comes to myself. So my spirit team loves to put me in timeout until I kind of take that self awareness and put myself in check and start working on myself. It's always easier to work on others than it is yourself, and to kind of do that reflection inward and see, what's my problem this time, or whatever. And there's so many times, and I've kind of just recently learned that when my team does put me in a timeout so that I can kind of work on myself, I just kind of go through the motions because I know I have a lot of crap in there, and it's I've gotten over it, and all that stuff, but I'm just too damn stubborn. And so I'm like, yeah, I have this problem, I'm gonna work on it, blah blah blah. I just go through the motions. I don't really sit down and assess and see why this is a problem, why I'm still wanting to hold on to it, and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm kind of lazy when it comes to myself. That and I love to help others, and I know the more you work on yourself, the better you'll be for everybody else. But I just don't like to focus on myself. I just don't do that. So my team puts me in timeout so that I do that.
Awesome. So I know for years, I was listening to, law of attraction, right? And what you believe, what you think of, you achieve, and it's going along, and I would get things, and then they would leave, and then I would get things, and they would leave, and I'd be like, okay, guys, what the heck is going on? I'm like, this is becoming a lot of work. Why is it I'm always like, as soon as I get it, I'm relaxed. I'm like, okay, cool, this is the way it's going to be. It leaves. And they're like, because of your emotions, you have not dealt with the dark side. And I'm like, okay, how do I deal with that? And it's like, so that's been the journey the last 10 years, is learning to deal with the shadow side of, the stuff that's happened, the things that are going on, and just bringing love to that darkness. So, because as soon as we can bring love to it, as we know, it becomes light.
Mhm.
And as soon as we decide, hey, I can love that, it actually leaves if it's part of the dark because it can't handle the love. So it has to go find somebody else who's willing to allow the dark to shine. Um, so, Shania, how do you handle getting the dark to leave and bringing light to it?
So, like I said, this is a topic that I really struggle with because I'm very stubborn. And uh, so when I am finally able to, just release it, because I forgive, and I work on myself and forgiveness on myself, which is one of the hardest things ever, is to forgive yourself. um and I work on all my issues and stuff, and I release them, and I shine the light on them, all that stuff. But then I start feeling like something's missing, so then I start taking it all back again, and that's one of my faults, is I take it back all the time. So it's a constant struggle. I'm always working on it. It's part of me, since birth, or well, before birth or whatever. So it's really hard when you are able to release that, because it is something I feel that I'm missing. It's like when you're not wearing your jewelry, you feel naked, or whatever. There's just something missing. And I know to replace, if once I do release, these different things, and do the forgiveness and all that, I know, you're supposed to fill it back up with the love and light and peace and forgiveness, and all the positive once you remove a negative. But it's just not comfortable to me to be. happy and lighthearted and uplifted and all bubbly and whatever. So it's something I really struggle with. I don't know why I have to keep taking it back.
Well, maybe we need to work on that.
You think?
Althea, what about you?
Well, it's always funny because I too recently discovered that I too was stubborn. I think that should be a group. Stubbornness Anonymous. Like,
I'm there.
yeah, I've been a member for like 15 years and also part of the denial club. And the resistance, yes, that is me. Um, so I guess the best way to kind of describe this is kind of, well, Michelle and I kind of talked about this the other day. It was kind of funny going through the self discovery because, like, all of a sudden I was just craving Ritz crackers. Like, I just wanted to eat Ritz crackers all the time. Like, I could eat a box, no problem. And so I have this book. It's called "What the Emotional Meaning Behind Addictions and Cravings Are." So I had to look up crackers, and because I'm like, seriously, like, what's going on? I should buy stock in Ritz. That's how bad it was getting, you know. And so I had to look up what crackers meant. And in there, the first thing it said was, "This is a result of suppressed rage." And I'm like, instantly triggered. And I'm like, I know I have self rage. But how do I deal with it? that, that's the question, right? So it's like being able to identify, like, okay, this is what I have to work on. And why is it important? Like, I mean, it's important that we take these moments when we have this realization and be like, okay, really, what is causing the self rage? And then it was kind of going into this resistance, like, because it's like sometimes we feel like we work and we work and we work, and yet here I am, I still have rage. What is going on? And it feels kind of like, well, what is all this that I've been doing? Have I really accomplished anything? And we start kind of going into this like self criticism, like, you know what's really going on with the self. And so being able to take that moment to go, okay, I've got some suppressed rage, obviously, because immediately I was triggered by just even hearing that I had rage, and I'm like, seriously, really? Yes, and my natural defense is to throw in the sarcasm, and so then of course I got really sarcastic with myself, and like, seriously, every day, but being able to work through this, like, it takes a moment, and you have to be able to sit there with it for a second and realize, like, what is it doing for me, and what is the purpose of me holding on to it, because everything is meaningful. There isn't one part of the healing aspect that isn't meaningful. And when we go through this, like, it is a lifetime journey. You don't just go into your self healing and be like, oh, well, I've recovered in 1 week. Everything that has ever happened in my life is now just blissful. We don't do that. We tend to, hoard it, we tend to stuff it. And so it slowly leaks out. Most of the time, if we're lucky, we can come at a pace that we're not just leaving self with big voids, right? Because there's nothing worse than all of a sudden feeling like something's missing. And then we're like, okay, obviously I need that remorse or regret. I need that. And so being able to decide ahead of time, like, we know there's going to be voids. So I think in deciding ahead of time what you can do about it, then that's where the key is. I think, you have your strategy of how you're going to go about this, because there is nothing worse than having that void. There's nothing worse than being like, I need some of that back because I feel like I don't have anything now. But there's
Hmm.
this place that you get to, I think, that is also kind of like this even kill, where you're just kind of like, okay, I don't know how to be just neutral on everything. And that's a new place to sit. And so I think you have to be aware of those events and what are you going to do about them. So with the suppress rage, currently working on it. Hopefully next week I'll have an answer for you.
Awesome. So yeah, I mean, one of the things that realized that the more and more I work on the shadow self, the more and more when things pop in unexpectedly, it's easier to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So last night, went to go place an order for a couple of new vendors for my deck of cards, and my one deck they upped the price from 10.50 to 37.50, and they said it was due to COVID. And so I was like, yeah, I cannot charge a vendor, over $40 for the deck, which means they're selling it for like $60 for the deck.
Right.
And it's like, no, I can't do that. So, I'm like going, okay, well, refund the money. And now I'm like going, okay, I'm in the market for a new publishing company. That one will do drop ship, two is in the US, and it's not going to charge an arm and a leg for their services. And so I was like, okay, the universe, it's got to be out there somewhere. We've been working on this. So we'll wait and see when it pops in and how long it takes. Um, but yeah, so it's like, and if I had not been working on the shadow stuff and dealing with disappointments and how to pivot and all that kind of stuff, when this popped in over the last couple of days, I probably would have freaked out just because of the amount of money I had to refund,
Right.
not because of the publishing company and all that stuff. So I'm like, okay, I'm more upset about the publishing company than I am about the money that I had to refund, which is because I've been working on the shadow self. Huge improvement. So I was like going, okay, and to be able to recognize too when we go through those milestones, that is also extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you were saying earlier, like, you'll let us know when you figure out the other stuff next week. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, I'll give you a
Um,
rundown of that session.
so, um, Althea, what are your thoughts on more on the pivoting point of working through your shadow self?
Well, okay, so there's interesting fact. Like they call. So I'm going to refer to the Arbinger Institute. They wrote a book on the. It's called The Leadership and Self Deception of the art of it. And like they talk about a choice point in our lives. And they say that, you come to this point and you can either choose the path of integrity or you can continue down the path of case building where you justify your actions, right? This is where we're like, well, I wouldn't be this way if so and so hadn't done that, right? So we become excellent lawyers, is really what we do. We build that case against these people that have wronged us, or we use those actions to condemn ourselves to a worse life instead of taking
Mm-hmm.
the path of integrity. So I think at this pivotal moment you have to decide you're worth it. You are worth it. You are worth the time that it takes, the investment in yourself that it takes in order to correct these behaviors within. I think one of the biggest challenges is that we wait and hope that other people will change and then we can change. And that's not the way
Mm-hmm.
it works. If you want to see a result, you have to put forth the effort. And so
Right.
I think this point choice is like, what do you really want to do? Like, where do you want to go? Do you want to continue to struggle like this? Do you want to continue to feel like this? Then you really literally have to become aware and take that path of integrity, self
Mm-hmm.
integrity. And so it's like anything that you can do to get yourself to that point, which sometimes a lot of us get there every single day. We have these point choices all day long. This is what builds up that emotional baggage that we decide to drag around with us every single day. And instead of getting into these battles of, like, well, I've got 6 trunks, 4 suitcases, and 2 totes, then, you know, we have to say, okay, I'm just getting rid of all this crap.
Mm-hmm.
At least, if I'm going to carry this around, it needs to be in a designer bag or something, maybe some flowers on it. But you have to get to this point where you decide you're worth it and you're going to do whatever it takes to recover from, because in this, you're not only helping yourself, you are helping and causing a ripple through others to inspire and to encourage them to change as well. But sometimes we truly have to just be the example.
Mm-hmm. So, Shania, what are your thoughts?
I think being aware of choice is very empowering. We have the choice to choose which path, to choose which emotions. It's nobody else's fault that we get mad or that we get sad or we're hurt. That's our choice to develop those feelings, to embrace those feelings. Um, and to be self-aware of all that is a huge tool to have. That self-awareness and choice goes a long way in anything, and especially in recovery of yourself, self recovery or whatever, and your emotions and baggage and stuff. um, but yeah, as she was talking about, the different bags and, at least get a designer bag and so on and so forth. That's something that kind of like that I thought, okay, if I'm not willing to just release it all, let's just downsize. Let's get rid of start small. Get rid of the easy stuff that just is, just space in the way. For takes that space up so that you can't have that positive energy around you or whatever. So, it sounds a lot easier than it is. Just but if you start with small, get rid of the smaller stuff first and work your way up to the bigger stuff, and just kind of downsize, and then it's not so overwhelming and you're not feeling so empty and naked. And the most important thing is, like you said, kind of have a plan. um what is your goal? What do you want, so that when you release, you can replace with that. Because if you just have that empty void, you're gonna take it back.
Mm-hmm. That is so true. And that's why it's like when I put out there, like, okay, this are the things that I need from a publishing company. So that way there's something there for them to work with,
Right.
you know? Um, so, Althea, do you have any other questions or anything you want to discuss about spiritual bypass?
Well, I always find this interesting, because it seems like that we discuss quite a bit, like the circle, right? That circle of healing, and it feels like it kind of just rolls around and around and around. And I think one of the things is like, what are some strategies that you can put in place to help you through this process, right? So one is kind of like we were talking about, you got to develop a strategy, because I think it is crucial to have that. Like, what are you hoping for? I mean, what is the end result? We work with the law of attraction, which I think is great. Okay. I truly do believe that, when you put stuff out there, it does and I just kind of think when you decide how you're going to go about doing this, it goes a lot to your character and what you think you're worth. If one of
Mm-hmm.
the things, if you don't feel like you're worth the time, then you got to decide, okay, I need to work on my worthy issue, my self worth issue. When
Mm-hmm.
you start working on that, maybe the goal is just to feel better today. If that's all the goal is, then great, go for that. Because just like an injury, um, when you give the body a moment to rest, it's going to start doing what it needs to heal itself. So
Mm-hmm.
if your goal is just to feel better today, maybe to feel like, okay, I have an option, because I think you get blinded literally by your issues, and we can't see that we have an option to choose. So I think working small, working your way up to the big stuff, I mean, everything is going somewhere. You just have to decide where you're going. But I
Mm-hmm.
think the most important thing is don't stop. Once you start, don't stop. Take a break, yes, but don't stop. And I think that is the crucial part in all of it, and not letting that dark come back in, is you just keep moving forward. I think why the law of attraction provides a good starting point, it's still you have to have the action. If
Mm-hmm.
you are not used to having positive thoughts, how do you have one? You
Right.
know? And so it's kind of like one of those things where it's like you have to start small and go into it gently without like, okay, today I realize I'm a train wreck, but tomorrow I'm going to be the CEO. Well, yeah, okay. All right, well, let's get started, because
Mm-hmm.
it may take more than 24 hours. That's what I'm saying. So it's like as you're working through it, like you have to set little goals and give
Mm-hmm.
yourself time to recover, because even though it's an emotional aspect, we still have to physically work through it too. There's
Yeah.
different parts that hold it, and so working through those and taking the time, I think, is where you got to be gentle at. So I think control, delegate, recover, move ahead, that's a strategy. So I think that's where it's at.
So one of the strategies that I've used and that I have my clients use is that when they're feeling that dark emotion, I have them hold it in their hands. Because a lot of times it probably comes from the inner child and not the adult. And we just have them hold it in the hands and just kind of send love to it. And then eventually it's like, oh, do you want this anymore? And then eventually it's like, no, I don't want it. And you just open your hand and you let it go. And you allow the universe to have to, take it away for you. Because your adult self, it says, yeah, no, this is not going to work anymore. I don't want this. I get to move on from this. So that is one of the strategies that I've used and I've used with my clients, is that physical representation of how to just let it go and let the universe take it, which seems to really work because it also changes the emotion and the mental component at the same time. Because your adult self is like going, yeah, no, this is not what I want. Why am I hanging on to this? This isn't even logical to even have. Because things that happen to our inner child and things that are acquired then, we got to remember our inner child does not have the logical mind that the adult has. So we can go in and go, yeah, logically this does not make sense anymore. And, I'm going to love you for this moment in time. And then I'm going to release. So, Shania, do you have any techniques or things that you work with your clients or yourself to help with skills
I
like that?
One thing that I like to ask my clients, when they're like, oh, I'm just so depressed, or I just need this, or I need that, or I want this, and nothing ever works, or blah blah blah. A question I have them ask themselves is, what would it take? What would it take for you to feel that peace? What would it take for you to be happy? What would it take for you to get that new job, or to whatever, what would it take? Dot dot dot. um, and to be honest with yourself, because so often it's us that are holding ourselves back, and so if you do that self reflection and like, what would it take? Well, I suppose, well, one, I should probably try, two, maybe, just kind of look at yourself and why you're holding yourself back is, so what would it take is a question I ask often. The other thing is, you have to do a lot of self reflection when for each of those baby steps that you're taking, each of those little goals. Say, um, stop it and reflect and say, ask yourself what part of that worked, what didn't, how did that make you feel, and why did it make you feel that way. The more you look into yourself as to how it made you feel and stuff, the more you're going to want this and not want that. You're going to change your goals, which is wonderful, because as you grow, and your goals are going to change. Your end goal might still
Hmm.
be the same, but your baby steps to get there are definitely going to change as you change. So do a lot of self reflection and be honest with yourself.
Another area I've actually seen like spiritual bypass are the ones who constantly read or listen to those self help books without stopping and taking one thing or two things within that book and incorporate it into their world,
Yeah.
into their life, into who they are. I have seen that so many times. Like they're like, when I'm doing a healing or whatever, and then escapism. I'm like doing. So, do you read a lot or watch a lot of TV? And they're like, well, I read a lot. I'm like, oh, so what kind of books? They're like, oh, the spiritual help books. I go, oh, do you ever stop and actually apply any of those concepts to your life that they're talking about? And they're just like, no, I just do one right after another. And I'm like, okay, we got to stop. There's always that millionaire idea in every single book that you ever read that will change your life, that is going to make that book worth it. And so you got to figure out what that millionaire idea is for you. Start applying it to your world in order to make that change. And that means that you probably don't even go on to your next book until you see that in your life on a regular consistency to where hey, this is changing. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next book now. Because even with like healing and everything else, if we don't stop and allow things to apply and to reshape what our world is going to look like, we don't know if it's working or not. And so another way of spiritual bypass is like doing all this work and all this work and all this work and not ever allowing it to be part of us.
So, like going through the motions, and not absorbing and making it part of us.
Yes. Yeah. I have seen that a lot. Shania, have you ever seen that or
Oh, I
experienced
do
that
that
yourself?
myself. Yeah. Uh, yeah, like I said, I spend the least time on myself. I focus on everybody else, and um, I just, yeah, that's something I'm always working on, and it's always easier said than done. You could give everybody else information, um, but when it comes down to doing it myself, mm, that's one of the goals I need to put down is to kind of work on myself there. But
Got
yeah,
it.
and I'm
Oh,
I'm very good at making up excuses. My life is too busy. I don't have time. Whatever it is, I'm fine, which I'm never fine. But so yeah, I'm
El-
really good at excuses.
Althea, what about you?
It's very interesting. It's so calming and kind of comforting that everybody kind of does the same thing. Because it's like, oh, see, I'm not alone. Okay, so this is what I started doing. Okay, so like when I got into the emotion code and started learning how to do this, like, of course, when I first started doing it, I was like, ooh, every day emotion code, emotion code, right? And then, of course, as you get busy helping people and things like that, like we start putting ourselves to the back burner, right? This is one of the things where it's like, I think every person goes through this. And we all then get to a point where we're like, wait a minute, I'm not feeling quite right again. What's going on? Right. So I have made it like a personal goal, and it takes a lot of effort sometimes. But like I schedule one day where it is just me. This is where I do my emotion code sessions to work on the stuff that comes up for me. Because it's like I want to be the best. I truly do, but I want to be the best so that I feel the best so that I can accomplish the most. Now, in doing that, there are some really ugly things and weird things that you're like, okay, obviously I got to work on this, that come up. And it's like being able to have that strategy of knowing, like, I got to take time for myself to, actually put into practice what I am preaching, right? And so that, when I was teaching classes and things like that, people would always ask, like, do you use your own stuff? And it's like, yeah, I do. And they're like, that's interesting because I know so and so and they do this and they don't do nothing. And it's like, oh, okay, well, eventually, they'll be able to do what they need to. So it's one of those things where I think the first thing you have to do is set that time aside. You just like if you plan in your schedule, you're planning dinner, that kind of thing, you have to set that time aside for yourself. Because if you don't take it, like ultimately we know that you will be made to take it.
Yes.
And it's like that's not very fun.
Mm.
I
Right.
I'm not one that likes to take orders, not even from myself. So, it's like if I just do it gently, then I'm more encouraged. So that's like the first thing. Like you've got to take time for yourself. And it is that making sure that you're taking the time to let things absorb. Because if you're working on your muffin top, you didn't get it overnight, so it's not going to go away overnight. I
Mm-hmm.
wished it would. That'd
Yeah.
make life so much easier. But as I work through it, I also have to make sure I'm doing the things that are good for the physical body to reduce that as well. Like, I can't just say, oh, yes, I'm working on my muffin top, and then I'm just going to sit here. I have to physically get up and walk too. I have to do the actions that also promote the healing. So it's that and deciding what that is. It looks different for everybody. But I mean, guessing like literally from our conversations, we all kind of ramble around about the same things. We do the same things. We
Mm-hmm.
incorporate different methods. So it's like taking that time, absorb it, and then do the actions that it takes. I think I think that has been the biggest reason that Tony Robbins has been so successful is because even in his tapes and things like that, he's like, we're going to take 7 minutes and you're going to do exactly what I just instructed you to do, whether it's journal or whatever. And so, literally, like on his DVDs or his tapes or his CDs or whatever it is you're listening to, there will be that 7 minute music spot where it's just taking the time to do exactly what he just instructed you to do because he's like, we have found that if we let you wait, you won't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Why? So like being able to do that, like, it is important to do that. So yes, that's what I think. That's my strategy.
So, Shania, do you have any things you want to discuss about spiritual bypass?
No, I feel that we've kind of covered it from most angles. I mean, it's just taking the action, doing what your intentions are, and
Mm-hmm.
that leap of faith, I guess, if you will. We all have intentions. We all, say we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but then we love to make excuses as to why we can't do it. And so don't let yourself get in the way of yourself.
Right? It's always easier said than done.
Exactly.
It is. Um, but yeah, I mean, when our spiritual bypass, I think it is us who decides whether or not we're going to give love to that dark shadow self so we can leave, or whether or not we're going to try to just ignore it like it never existed and never happened. And I know I went that route, and it was not a good life. It was always full of challenges. I mean, granted, life is always full of challenges, but I would rather have the challenge that I'm having right now, being able to just explore the world, than having the challenge that, is my husband going to leave me? Is am I going to have food in all this other kind of stuff. So I was like, I would rather have the challenges I'm dealing with now than then. Because no matter in life, we always deal with challenges. The challenges just change. They don't go away. If we think, oh, if I become rich, I won't have any of this, but now you have new challenges.
Right.
You have the new challenge of how are you going to manage all that money? How are you going to, do you have employees and how are you going to manage that? So there's so many different things that come into play with changing. So it's like, and we always have challenges. So we cannot bypass that. No matter how much we want to think we can. Um, but yeah, I mean, the biggest thing about the spiritual bypass that I have discovered is that even within myself, is that once I decided to start dealing with the dark side and loving it and feeding it the love that it needed, more and more of it started to show up in my world in a lot easier of a way of showing up so I could recognize it and let it go again. And like with what I do with the Akashic records and that, yes, I am also one who practices what I preach. I worked on myself for the first like 3 months when I found out the Akashic records and what I can do, and I went in every single day and cleared this and cleared that and cleared this, and my world tipped upside down in a quick hurry. And I'm just like, whoa. And that's when I realized, like, nope, we got to have time to let things integrate. So, as the people who have some of the best programs have them because they learned on themselves what to do and what not to do and why.
Right.
Um, and so I know, like, for me, when I work on that shadow self with people, I've been through that already. And so I can give them the compassion that they need to help them work through what they're going through. Althea, I know that you have a program. Have you worked through your little kinks yet?
You know, it's so funny as you were talking about that. The thoughts that were coming to my mind is like, uh, when it's when you're working on this stuff, like really depending on like how much you want to do, like is depending on how often you should do that. Like this, like when people start questioning and asking, like, well, where do you start? How long? What can I expect? How long is it going to take? This is what I usually tell them. I'm like, okay, it's like going to the chiropractor. You know, the first time that you go to the chiropractor, you walk away and you're like, oh, my body is a little sore because I haven't been adjusted in a while, right? But if you go once a week for the first month, you'll find that your body starts holding its place. Then you go once every 2 weeks for 2 months. And as you go through this process, like the body gets stronger and remembers how it's supposed to be in a line, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
pretty soon, by month number 4 or 5, you're able to go once a month to maintain. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
depending on the amount of stuff that you want to do, really is depending on how much you want to get into a line. Do you want to start working through the stuff? Do you expect delays? Do you expect all this stuff? Yes, you should. Because like once a week is a worthwhile appointment for the first month. Like to get that where you're like, okay, now I can feel like I can kind of manage it. Okay, so now we'll go every 2 weeks. Okay. Then if you need a checkup, then get that appointment and get your checkup and do it because it's like it's much easier to maintain. Now, the programs that you're working on, like we all have different programs because, like you said, Michelle, we learn very quickly, like, okay, yeah, I can't do that every day, apparently. Um, because if we don't, then it is kind of like we're just moving through it so fast that we get a headache or we end up getting sick or we have to like something happens, an event happens to get us to hold and take a pause. And if we don't do it ourselves, then we get made to take it. So nobody wants to be told what to do. So it's much easier just to decide to do that on your own. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like in this program in this program that I've been starting to work through and work on because you got to try it out yourself to see if it's viable, right? So, this program that I'm currently working on is having that session once a week. It is doing it and then making sure that I'm monitoring what's going on during different events, things that I know that are going to trigger me that I can't necessarily get out of dealing with. Okay, so like traffic, if it's something that triggers you and you have to drive somewhere, you know that you're going to be dealing with that. If you have to drive to work every day, you're probably going to be triggered on an everyday basis. So maybe today we don't flip people off. Maybe today we wave to people, you know, it's the whole thing. You know, it's slowly just taking that. And it's like once you get in and get this strategy, I think it is key to have that strategy. And I think once you decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to devote this much time to it, and then I'm going to reevaluate in a month or 6 months and say, okay, what has changed? What hasn't changed? So I think write a statement out. Okay. What I want to accomplish, why I feel it's important, where I feel I'm at right now, what I am struggling with. Put that away, and in 6 months, pull it back out and say, I have been able to work through this. I feel better about that. I'm now working on this aspect, because you can do that self evaluation. You don't have to wait for anybody else to do it for you. You can do it today and put that aside. So, as my first month into this program, like there's been some stuff come up because, like, I made the choice to look up what crackers meant. And then I'm like, oh, that. That again. Okay, because there are different events that cause you to suppress stuff. Not the,
Hmm.
whatever it was that caused the first suppression of the stress is not necessarily the third event that caused me to suppress that. They're different things. So it's like, okay,
Hmm.
maybe it is from when I was 4 years old, or maybe it was from yesterday, you know? So it's like, what
Yep.
causes you, and as you work through it, like it's easy to work through that. But that's what I kind of think. Take the time for the program, decide what you want to do, come up with your strategy, and then work it like a complete system, regardless of what it is. So that's what I think. Really
So,
long winded.
Shania, do you have a program for your clients, or do you just normally do like a one session, or how do you work through with them with their stuff?
Normally with my clients, I do the initial healing, and it's kind of funny. It's like a chiropractor. You could tell those who have been healed before because it's like a
Hmm.
memory. They're like, oh yeah, that's where I'm supposed to be. Or whatever. It's so much easier to heal somebody who's already been healed before. But one of my goals is to teach my clients how to heal themselves, and to have that self-awareness and stuff, because that's all part of being healed, is knowing how to maintain it yourself and to know what it is that needs to be healed and all that. So I call I I sit down and talk to them about what I found, in each chakra and in their emotions and stuff, and we talk about that, and I'm like, I'm sorry, you were sexually abused, and I'm sorry, this addictions, whatever. And we talk about that, and then I tell them, where it's at in their body, where they're holding it, and how that's affecting them physically, and so that they could kind of tune into that, and like, oh, that's why I get headaches, or that's why my neck is sore, or my back, or whatever, wherever they're holding it, so that they know that when they feel that, that it's time to maybe start doing a little self meditation themselves and stuff. And I always recommend, there's guided meditations on anything on YouTube. So that's one place that I steer them to, and for the most part, most of them are open to it. I don't find too many. I make everybody cry, but in a good way, because it's so hard for people to kind of look deep in, and look at all that pain that they have, and the trauma and stuff like that. So when somebody else is able to see it and say, I'm sorry that your parents were addicted, or you were abused, or whatever, and I'm able to see that and stuff, it helps them to be able to surface it and look at it, with somebody else instead of alone, which can be scary. So um, I just try to teach them how to do it themselves. Is basically
Hmm.
the short answer to that long-winded answer.
It's all good. Sometimes we just need to use up some time, right? But no, I totally understand about teaching them how to do it themselves, because that is actually my end goal too. When I teach my clients how to connect and how to look for the positive and how to use my meditation deck that they all get and stuff like that. Because then they can use that as they see their patterns to go, okay, what's going on? Oh, I need to pick a couple positive cards today to kind of, like, I'm feeling down. I need to see the positive today. I need to draw some cards so I can look for the positive within the world. Especially in today's world, there is so easy to see the dark and the negative right now because it just happens to be everywhere.
Yes.
And we need to be aware that it's out there so we can send it love and change it. but yet we don't want to also live there. And so we need to live in the moment or in the positive because we don't want to live in the dark. We don't want to live in the light. And so, but yet we need to know the dark is there so we can send it the love to release it so that way it can go away. And like, there's so much stuff that we've been doing worldwide for this over the last couple of years. And this is why I really think that the world is just turned upside down too with everything that's going on because everything's being exposed and just like our own world, like the dark it comes out, it becomes exposed. It shows you, okay, this is where you need to work on. This is where you need to get love because it wasn't there before. And with each new challenge that we're faced, it's like, okay, let's just go with it. Let's see what happens. And I have like also come to realize that throughout my journey of healing, that the more times I overreact, the more that now becomes mine and I own it. So when things were happening between yesterday and today about everything that's going on, I was like, we're just going to deal with it. We're just going to deal with it. Okay, these are my choices. I couldn't find this, so I need to do this, and that's just the way it has to be. I would rather like refund the money and have that integrity and possibly have a sale down the road when I can figure this stuff out than spend more money later on trying to defend why I didn't do it or whatever. And I'm like going, yeah, that's not living in my lifestyle that I want. So it's just been a really interesting journey these last couple of days. So, but anyways, we're coming to the end of our hour. Althea, how can people get a hold of you?
If you want to start, like it's a gentle process, you can get a hold of me at Facebook at Direct Emotion LLC. That's where I'm at. You can also message me directly at Althea Mitchell. I think there's quite a few, so remember my face. You know. And the other thing that you can always do is you can always email me at directemotionllc@gmail.com. You can always get a hold of me that way.
Shania, how can they get a hold of you?
Um, Basically, Facebook. I guess I have a page there called Soul Therapy, and that's where I do all my business. Or you can find me on my personal Facebook, which is Shania Melland. So
And you can go ahead and find me at healingwithmichelleadams.com, Healing with Michelle Adams on Facebook. And right now, this video is being played on Mystical Mindset, which you should be able to get a hold of all of us there. You can also message us. So, guys, thank you for joining us today. It has been a real blast sitting here talking to everyone about spiritual bypass. And we will see you guys all next week. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Have a great week.
bye.